welcome to the post-processing portion of Photographing the World, Cityscape, Astrophotography, and Advanced Post-Processing. It's here where we're going to be working the second half of each one of the lessons. We're going to take that in-camera practical knowledge and start blending it with the post-production skills. If you've already watched the first tutorial, which was landscapes and post-processing, you're already familiar with how this is going to work. Basically, things are going to get progressively more difficult over time. But unlike the first one, this one starts at an intermediate level. So don't panic if you're not up to par yet, just you may have to watch the first few episodes a few times just to get up to speed. Also, if you already have a basic working knowledge of Photoshop, that'll help you. In this tutorial, I'm going to try to get through the post-processing in a much quicker pace because we have a lot more content to cover. I've designed this instruction to be a workflow series, meaning that I'm showing you my process from start to finish and how I process all of my files on a daily basis. I'm giving you all these files to download, but please bear in mind that these are not your files. Feel free to use these for educational purposes so that you can learn all these techniques and apply them to your own scenes. But please do not upload them to Facebook, Google+, or Instagram. Please don't sell them or use them in your own portfolio. That would be really awkward when we find out about it. If you take a look at all the work that I've created, all the photos that I have in my portfolio, whether they're extremely complex or very simplistic, they only rely on 4 simple steps. And the first step is exposure adjustment using camera raw. The second one is any exposure blending that needs to be done. Sometimes we'll be doing exposure blending, sometimes we'll be using a single exposure. The third step is adjusting contrast, fixing colors, doing any detail adjustment that's necessary. And the last thing in step 4 is additional sharpening and softening of the image. And when I say softening, I mean any noise reduction that needs to take place. For the entire duration of this tutorial, we're basically going to be focusing on using Capture One for our raw editing. If you've downloaded the companion file for this tutorial, you can find each lesson in its own separate folder. And if you open that folder, you'll find folders for everything we're going to be doing. You'll find folders for the Capture One library, any Photoshop files that are associated with it, and all the raw files you'll need to either follow along with me or build it yourself. Something else to point out is that I work on a Macintosh computer, and that basically means that my hotkeys are going to be different than if I were on a PC. So anytime you hear me say Command, you can follow along on a PC by using Control. Anytime I say Option, you can use Alt. If I say Command-C for copy, just use Control-C. It's that simple. My post-processing workflow really favors using a Wacom tablet and a stylus. That allows me to paint on selections and masks gesturally using natural brush strokes. I can also change the brush size, and I have 2000 levels of pressure sensitivity that allow me to create really fine-tuned and simply drawn masks. If you're not comfortable with using a stylus, this may be a really good time to start because I'll be explaining a lot of how to use it as I go along. If you have a mouse, don't worry, you can do all the same things with a mouse as well. Now that we've covered the main differences between Lightroom and Capture One in raw processing workflow, I just want to give you guys a little bit more information about how to configure your workspace using Wacom tablets. So throughout this tutorial, you're going to see a couple different variations of how I work. So the first thing I want to cover is how to set something up if you're using a small tablet. So this is the Intuos Small, and the way that I like to use the Small, since it has such a small imprint here, is I like to leave it on the right side of the keyboard. So I usually have the keyboard on the left and the tablet on the right. Now bear in mind, while I'm on the road, full-time, location independent, I do most of my editing on a 15-inch Retina MacBook Pro. So the same thing happens there. I have the laptop here, I have access to all the hotkeys, spacebar for panning in Photoshop. I'm able to use the stylus and my brush-based workflow and use it just like this. So brush with the right hand, hotkeys with the left hand. And before I move on to the other tablet configuration, I just want to show you guys here in the options for the Wacom tablet, it's where you can find and change anything. The first thing I want to talk about is the stylus itself. Now, the stylus has 2 buttons on it. It has a lower button, a top button, and it has a click, and it has an eraser. Nobody ever uses the eraser. In Photoshop, we will never use the eraser tool, so don't worry about that. But basically, you have the ability to change the tip feel and the current pressure. So you can see as I click, I can change it. As I push down to get that level of pressure, I can actually change it. If I want to push harder to get that, I can change it. Or if I want to be really soft to hit that maximum, I can change it. If you're not sure, leave it right in the center. It's usually a pretty good option. The other thing I want to cover here is this is how I have my keys bound. You can literally change this to anything you want. I like the top button to be set to right click, and what I use is something very special for the other click. The bottom click is actually going to be set to a modifier, and that modifier is going to be Control Option together. So I'm just going to go ahead and set that. Let's go into Photoshop real quick, and I'm going to show you guys exactly what that does. By holding Option and Control on a Mac or pressing the bottom key on the stylus and going from left to right, I can actually change the brush size. Left to right is size, up to down is the hardness of the brush. So I use this all the time. If you aren't doing this, you can change it a couple other ways. You can use the bracket keys on the keyboard, or if we go back into those options, there's one more way to do it on the functions here. So we have different functions, which I'm going to get into when I move to the bigger tablet, but we also have the touch ring. So you can see the touch ring has 4 toggles. If you press it once, you get this one twice, 3, and 4 times. So 4 options you can get to use the jog wheel. And you can see that the 4th one down here is set to a keystroke, and that's going to be the brush size. So you can toggle your brush size just by using this wheel as well. I prefer it right on the pen because I usually have my left hand on the keyboard accessing the hotkeys. So this is basically the pen-based workflow, and it works really well because here's what I can do. I'll disable this mask, but basically I can select a brush size, and you can see that I have my flow set to 10. If I set it to 20, I can actually just brush in parts of an image. So in this case, a very simple example, but I can change that brush size, change the hardness of that brush, and I can really start to brush elements in and have full control over the pressure sensitivity as well as the hardness and softness here, while still being able to access hotkeys, like say I want to start over on that, with my left hand. So it's a very powerful workflow. So the Into Small Tablet works great if you're using a laptop 15 or 17-inch monitor, maybe even up to a 20-inch monitor, but this is a 27-inch monitor. So for 27 inches, medium tablet is something I strongly recommend, and you can see it has a much larger imprint area that matches the screen a little bit more. And the way that you have to think about it, I'm going to set this up in a second, is this is just a turn of the wrist. This is moving your arm to the larger one here. When you get all the way to the large and XL tablets, it's a whole, you start using your shoulder as well. So most people buy the medium tablet for home and home office use. For travel, this small one is really great. Let me go ahead and swap them out real quick, and we'll just take a look at some of the differences. So I'll move the small one to side here, and I will take this one, shift the keyboard to the side a little bit, and go ahead and plug this guy in. Now, right off the bat, with this workflow, I feel like my arm's too far away from the keyboard on the right because I have to do too much. So my workflow with a medium or large tablet is to actually have the tablet in front of me, just like this, so I can gauge the entire tablet. And then I like to put the keyboard right in front of me like this. So basically what I can do is draw here with my hands slightly forward on the keyboard. The reason is I really like using hotkeys in Photoshop. But what if you don't want to use the hotkeys at all? What if you're not really into hotkeys, you like menu commands, or you want to bake these into your own thing? Well, right now this tablet's set up to have the same keys on the pen, but if I go into the options for the tablet under System Preferences, you can see I have functions too. And under functions, I already talked about the touch ring, but we have express keys. So here, each one of these keys, and you see 1, 2, 3, 4 on the bottom, 4 on the top, and then the jog dial I talked to you guys about right in the center. So you can bind these to different things. So right now, here's some of my favorite things to do. I actually have a keystroke. So I have spacebar, select, which is the V key, zoom, and the brush tool. So if I'm in Photoshop, I can keep my hand down here, and I can actually access the spacebar, or I can go ahead and zoom, and then I can have the select tool, and I can actually just press these buttons here, and I can have most of the options that I need inside of Photoshop without ever having to touch the keyboard. So with a medium tablet, it's easy to switch between to go up here. With a large tablet, this would be much further away from you or off to the side. So a lot of people really like these express keys. I use them sometimes, it depends what kind of mood I'm in, but there's one thing that's extremely powerful that you can use while engaging these keys, and that's the radial menu. A lot of people love the radial menu, and what it allows you to do is pick your favorite options that you have. So here I've actually set it to selecting options, invert mask, invert selection, paste, undo, redo, flood with background color, flood with foreground, and deselect. And while I'm in Photoshop, this is really nice. And I'll show you guys here, if I have this mask enabled, I have my quadrants come up here, and you can see that when I engage them with this button on the tablet, I can bring up all these other options. So what I can do here with my mask is I can say invert, and now I can make it a black mask. Well, I can invert it again. So basically I can do everything just by using express keys and a combination of express and radial menus. So again, that's going to be up to you guys. Now I am using these occasionally in production, but here's the thing. It's really annoying when I press a button and we have a menu that comes up right on the screen. Right now, if you go to the express key menu, it's by default set to show express view. If I put my finger over one of these buttons, it's going to show me what all of these buttons do. And as I roll my fingers over them, it's going to show me, just to remind me. But if I leave this on while I'm teaching you guys, you're going to see this come up every time that I use a button. So I always turn this off. Now, truth be told, I love using express keys when I have a large tablet, but with a small and a medium tablet, I've become so accustomed to the left-hand, right-hand workflow from working on a laptop for so many years that I can actually type and engage any hotkey in Photoshop without looking with one hand. So it's faster for me sometimes to just use the keyboard than it is for me to use the express keys. What I'll actually do is sometimes I'll use the jog dial, sometimes I'll use these on the thumb keys right here, and then I'll also use the brush. But it's pretty much up to you guys. So I'm opening it up to you guys if you want to maybe experiment with this. If you're not really into hotkeys, you can bind all your favorite commands onto the tablet and you'll get really used to it. But just keep in mind that everything that you do with the pen becomes gestural, so really take advantage of it. And when you're first getting started using the pen, remember that just like you're writing, just like you're going to write your name on a piece of paper, you don't start with the pen on the paper. You rest your palm on the paper and then you draw as your palm moves across the paper. It never just stays above the tablet. So similar here, you rest your palm with the tip of the pen above the tablet and you move around without it touching the top of the tablet, and you'll see that you'll get the mouse, you get the cursor. As soon as you start to press, that's a click. So as soon as it makes contact, that's a click. So just keep that in mind. It's very gestural. You can slide around on the tablet all day, and then as soon as you want to engage it, you just click. Or in this case, with the pen, I can right-click, or I can do any of the bound options that are set to the keys themselves. Something that you guys are going to notice this whole time is this beautiful black bezel around this monitor. Well, this monitor is actually not just a monitor. It's actually a Wacom Cintiq 27 pen and touch. And that means I can actually use this same stylus on the surface of this itself. And not only that, if I'm in Photoshop, I can actually touch and zoom and rotate. So this is actually really powerful for being able to edit or paint inside of Photoshop. The cool thing is, you can get a stand for it, and I'm just going to move this stuff out of the way here. And if you just squeeze these two hinges here, you can actually rotate the screen, and then there's a hinge lock system right back here. And if I engage this, then I have the freedom to actually bring this screen right down in front of me and draw right on the screen. So when I'm working on my own files here, I really like having the chance to work in Photoshop this way because it's a fully immersive environment. But for this tutorial, this kind of workflow takes a little bit more time. So if I'm doing a lot of precision work on my own portfolio or I'm building these files for myself, what I like to do is build them using this any chance that I get. But then when I'm teaching, I find it very, very quick to be able to teach on one of these tablets engaging all the hotkeys. Because this comes with one more device, and it comes with a shuttle dial here. So the shuttle dial is basically an enhanced version of these express keys that you find on the left. So you'll have all different shuttle dial options, you have all these different buttons. Every single one of these things is programmable to either keystrokes, hotkeys, or anything else, express menus, custom menus, and everything like that. And it actually sits as a magnet on the side of the screen. So this is a really fun thing to use. People in visual effects, in Hollywood who do matte painting, very high-end Photoshop work, use one of these things on a daily basis. And I have to admit, when I'm masking or I'm painting or I'm doing color correction, this is a really intuitive, fun way to work. So while you guys aren't going to see me use this to teach you guys Photoshop because everything can be done either here on a tablet or here, just keep in mind that this is probably the highest end item you can have for digital retouching. Now, it does also come with a very high price tag, so don't be discouraged that way. I'm definitely not encouraging you to just go out and buy a Cintiq right away. If you're starting from a mouse-based workflow and you want to sort of transition into a pen-based workflow, any of these tablets are fine. Now, these are the Pro series, but they also have the Intuos. So Intuos Pro and then the regular Intuos, which is an entry level. The only thing that really changes is the pen itself. I'm using a Pro Pen. The Pro Pen comes with the Cintiq, and the Pro Pen works with all the devices. The pen that comes with the Intuos is almost identical. It's slightly softer around here, and it doesn't have this little bezel, this silver rim around the buttons. Just keep in mind that if you buy one of these tablets, and then you just go to a friend's house and they happen to have a Cintiq, it's not going to work on that. So the Pro Pen works on everything, and everything backwards compatible from that. But basically, these are all the devices that I'm going to be using powered by Wacom. I've been using the Wacom products since 1999, actually, since way back in the day when I switched from a mouse, and at that point, I never looked back. So it's a really fun technology, but it's also really powerful, and it's sculpted and shaped my entire workflow around this intuitive brush-based system. So while you guys are watching all of these tutorials on post-processing, bear in mind that I'm able to do all of these brush strokes just by using these simple gestural strokes of my wrist, and that's really important. Where a mouse, it's a little bit different. You have to do a lot of clicking. This is very much like painting. And using one of these Intuos tablets is like painting. Using this is like having an infinite canvas. So anytime I want to be completely immersed in my work, this is definitely where I find myself working. And it's also nice because it'll go all the way flat, up high. I can stand up and paint and work, sit down in the desk, paint and work. And I can also use the hotkeys here, or I can use the express keys here. It's very powerful. So depending on what kind of setup you have, whether you have a large monitor or a small monitor, I hope this helps shed some light on which Wacom tablet is for you. I'll be trying to incorporate as many different software packages as I can in order to give you guys a well-rounded education of the different ways you could process photos. Some of these things are pretty expensive, some of them are free, but most of them allow you to have a free trial. If you want to go ahead and download the trial, use it for these tutorials, it's something that you can decide for yourself whether or not it fits into your workflow. Bear in mind that you don't have to have a ton of expensive software if you want to be a better photographer, but you are going to have to invest something if you want to take it to the next level. In some cases, with some of the software that we're using, we actually have some discount codes available for you guys, and you can find those in the PDF document that comes with the tutorial. So enough introduction, it's time to get started.